They kidnapped me at 8, held me for ransom, and spent a decade behind bars. Now they're free, standing at my door, asking for forgiveness. But behind their tearful eyes, I see secrets they're still hiding. Do they really want me back? Or is this just the beginning of something darker? Please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more powerful stories. Thank you. It was an ordinary summer afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy but the world feels safe. I was in my grandfather's garden, the smell of jasmine floating in the breeze, chasing butterflies with the kind of innocent joy only an 8-year-old can have. My biggest worry was whether I'd get chocolate or vanilla ice cream after lunch. That's when a black sedan rolled up at the edge of the property. I remember the crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of a car door, and the way my stomach nodded for no reason I could name. Then suddenly I was being scooped up, too strong to fight, too fast to scream. My eyes met the faces of my captors, and my mind shattered. It was my parents. At first, my brain refused to believe it. Parents don't steal their own child. Parents protect you from danger, they don't become the danger. But their faces were hard, determined. They didn't speak to comfort me. They didn't explain. They just drove. Later, I would learn the truth. They weren't there to take me home. They were there to take me away, away from safety, away from my grandfather, so they could use me as a bargaining chip. My grandfather was wealthy, and in their twisted logic, my life was worth the ransom they believed he'd pay. The rest of that day was a blur of fear, confusion, and disbelief. I kept waiting for the moment they'd smile and say it was all a mistake. That moment never came. They didn't care about the nightmares that would haunt me. They didn't care about the trust they were breaking. All they cared about was the payout. The cabin they took me to was small, musty, and smelled of damp wood. The curtains were drawn tight, and the only light came from a single flickering bulb. My world shrank to 4 walls and their shadowy figures. They kept me there for days, feeding me cheap microwave meals, locking the door each time they left. I could hear them on the phone, voices low but tense. "Tell him we're not bluffing," my father said one night. "I already did," my mother replied. "He has the money. He'll pay if he wants to see the kid again." It was me. Every sound outside made my heart jump. I hoped it was my grandfather. I hoped it was the police. I hoped anyone would find me. And they did. It was late afternoon when I heard shouting, boots stomping, the crash of a door splintering. My parents tried to run, but it was over before it began. Strong arms lifted me out of the chair, and I looked up into the face of a police officer. "You're safe now," he said, though I didn't feel safe, not yet. Hours later, I watched as my parents were led away in handcuffs. My mother glanced back at me, her expression unreadable. My father didn't look at me at all. In court, the truth spilled out in front of strangers. The ransom demand, the recorded calls, the plan to use me as leverage. I had to sit there, small and silent, as the judge sentenced them to 10 years in prison. I thought I'd never see them again, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. Adjusting to life without my parents was strange. On one hand, I felt abandoned, like a piece of me had been ripped away. On the other, I knew that piece had been poisoned. My grandfather stepped into the role of guardian without hesitation, strict but loving, a man who valued discipline as much as he valued my safety. School became my escape. I threw myself into studies and sports, trying to drown out the whispers from classmates who had heard pieces of the story. Some kids looked at me with pity, others with curiosity, but very few truly understood. At night, the nightmares came. Sometimes I was back in the cabin, the door locked, the light flickering. Other times, it was the moment in the garden when the black sedan appeared. My grandfather would sit with me until I fell back asleep, never pushing me to talk before I was ready. Over the years, the raw pain dulled into a scar. I learned to keep people at arm's length, to read intentions before trusting. I told myself I was fine, that my life was better without them. And for a long time I believed it. Until the day they came back. It was a Saturday morning, and the house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. My grandfather was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee the way he did every morning. I was halfway through making breakfast when I heard it, 3 slow, deliberate knocks at the front door. Something in my chest tightened. We weren't expecting anyone. I opened the door and there they were. My parents. 10 years had aged them. My mother's hair was streaked with gray, her eyes sunken but still piercing. My father looked thinner, his once broad shoulders slouched as if the weight of his past still clung to him. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. Then my mother's lips trembled. "We've changed," she said softly, her voice breaking. "We want to be part of your life again." Behind her words, I felt the ghost of the cabin, the echo of slammed doors, the sharp sting of betrayal. My father's eyes flickered with something I couldn't read, regret, perhaps, or maybe calculation. I didn't know what to say. My grandfather appeared at my side, his posture stiff, his gaze hard as steel. "You should leave," he said flatly. But I stopped him. "Wait." My own voice surprised me. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to lock it and never think of them again. Another part, smaller, but insistent, needed to know why they were here. Needed to know if anything they said could be true. "I need time to think," I told them, my voice shaking but firm. They nodded as if they'd expected that. Then they turned and walked away, disappearing into the street. But I knew this wasn't the end, only the beginning of a new kind of uncertainty. The moment the door closed behind them, my grandfather turned to me. "You're not seriously considering talking to them, are you?" he asked, his tone sharp, almost panicked. "I don't know," I admitted. And I truly didn't. Part of me was furious, how dare they show up after everything? But another part of me couldn't ignore the curiosity that gnawed at my mind. What did they want now? That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, memories from the cabin came rushing back. The smell of damp wood, the sound of the lock clicking, the way my parents' voices turned cold when they spoke about money. And yet, mixed with those memories were flashes of earlier years, birthday candles, bedtime stories, my mother's laugh before it turned sharp, my father's strong hands holding mine. Were those moments lies, or had they been real once? Over the next few days, I noticed small signs they weren't going to disappear quietly. A letter slipped under the door, my mother's handwriting, shaky but familiar. A bouquet of flowers left on the porch with no note. Once, I caught sight of them across the street, just watching. The questions in my head multiplied. Were they genuinely trying to make amends, or was there another motive? Could they really have changed after 10 years in prison, or was this just another game? I knew I needed answers, but I also knew that opening that door, metaphorically or literally, could mean opening old wounds that had never truly healed. Days passed with a constant tug-of-war in my mind. Every time I considered cutting them off completely, I'd picture my mother's trembling hands or the gray in my father's hair. But then I'd remember the cabin, the cold, the hunger, the fear, and my stomach would twist. I spoke to friends, my counselor, and of course, my grandfather. Opinions were split. Some said people can change, that maybe prison had reformed them. Others warned me not to be naive, that my safety and peace of mind came first. One night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the letter my mother had left. Her words were full of apologies and promises, but they felt careful, as if she was telling me just enough to lure me in. Finally, I decided I needed to face them, but on my terms. No home visits, no sudden appearances. We'd meet in a public place, where I could leave any time I felt unsafe. The decision didn't bring peace, but it gave me a plan. And in situations like this, a plan was the only thing keeping me from being swept away by uncertainty. The cafe I chose was bright, crowded, and loud, exactly the kind of place where I could disappear into the noise if things went wrong. I arrived early, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold by the time they walked in. My mother's eyes lit up when she saw me, tears pooling instantly. My father looked more guarded, scanning the room before sitting down across from me. For a moment, no one spoke. "I don't know where to start," my mother said finally, her voice trembling. "We were wrong. We hurt you. And I think about it every single day." My father nodded but stayed silent, his hands clasped tightly on the table. I listened. I wanted to hear them out, but every word felt like walking across a frozen lake, unsure if the ice would hold. They spoke about prison, how it had broken them, how it had changed them. They spoke about wanting to rebuild some version of a family. Part of me wanted to believe them. Another part of me kept replaying that first day in the cabin. When I left the cafe, I told them nothing about whether I'd see them again. I just said, "We'll see." And for now, that was as much as I was willing to give. In the days after our meeting, I found myself replaying every detail, the way my mother's voice cracked, the way my father barely spoke, the way my heart seemed to slam against my ribs whenever they looked at me. They didn't call or show up uninvited, which surprised me. Instead, a simple text from my mother appeared every few days. "Hope you're well. Thinking of you." No pressure, no demands. My father didn't reach out at all, which left me wondering if he cared, or if he just didn't know how to. My grandfather kept his guard up, reminding me that people can pretend for a long time if it gets them what they want. But even he admitted they were doing the right thing by respecting my boundaries. I noticed subtle changes in myself too. I wasn't as quick to shut the door in my mind when I thought of them. I started wondering what they had been like before desperation twisted their choices. Were they always capable of such harm, or had life pushed them to that point? Still, every time I let myself consider trusting them, I remembered the cabin, the flickering light, the locked door, the knowledge that I wasn't there because they loved me. This was my new reality, balancing between cautious hope and guarded suspicion, knowing that one wrong move could drag me back into a world I fought so hard to escape. As months passed, I realized my struggle wasn't just about trusting them, it was about reclaiming my control. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't a single act. It's a layered process, full of setbacks, small steps, and sometimes, the realization that you may never get all the answers you want. Boundaries became my shield. I discovered I could keep the door cracked without letting it swing wide open. I could hear their apologies without erasing the past. I could grant them moments without giving them my entire life. My grandfather's steady presence taught me the strength of quiet resilience, that protecting your heart doesn't make you cold, it makes you wise. My own scars reminded me of the fragility of trust, and how hard it is to rebuild once broken. By the end, I didn't know if my parents' change was real or just another mask. But I knew this, I had changed. I was no longer the powerless child in that locked cabin. I was someone who could decide who stayed in my life, and who didn't, and that was my greatest victory. When I think about the future now, it's not defined by what my parents did to me, it's defined by what I've done since. I've built a life that isn't tethered to their choices. I've surrounded myself with people who earn my trust, not demand it. My parents remain at the edge of my life, cautiously testing the boundaries I've set. Sometimes they meet them with patience, sometimes with silence. Whether they ever fully step back in, or stay where they are, no longer controls my peace. I'm not chasing closure anymore. I'm creating it. I'm living proof that even the deepest wounds can heal into something stronger. And as I move forward, I carry one unshakable truth. My story doesn't belong to them. It belongs to me. If this story moved you, please don't forget to give it a like. And if you love emotional, powerful stories like this one, please make sure to subscribe to the channel.